It is very difficult to slay a dragon. The beast, enormous in its size, booming in its voice, with the smell of sulfur and corpses, is nigh impossible for someone like you or me to defeat. That's why it's smarter to bring along some friends.
Hi there, I'm Bedlam Oak, a communication researcher, massive TTRPG nerd, and a secret third thing. While getting my very fancy PhD, I noticed that the public really doesn't have access to good sources of information about organizational communication. That's why I've decided to start this new project with my little brother, Catacombs and Communications, to give away my degree for free. I specialize in community-based and volunteer organizing. And I've noticed that D&D adventuring parties are a lot like volunteer organizations. In an adventuring party in Dungeons & Dragons, or whatever system you prefer, characters work together to achieve incredible feats that would be impossible for them to achieve individually. In heroic high fantasy, specifically, party members unite to overcome existentially threatening evil. One example of this is Vox Machina from Critical Role, who united their party and members across Exandria to slay Vecna, the Whispered One, a lich on the verge of godhood. The epic scope and need for teamwork is also found in the community organizing projects I have studied, such as labor organizers fighting for a contract that will give them a living wage, or protesters demanding divestment from the military-industrial complex. These projects are similarly massive in scope and address existential threats, and therefore require massive teamwork. Further, party members don't get paid to be part of a party. While they might find sweet loot along the way and split it amongst themselves, it's generally not the reason they joined the party. Usually they have another reason, and being given all the trinkets in the world is secondary. This is also true of real-life volunteer organizations, where, yes, the members of the organization might receive a really cool button, or a better mayor, or a nice t-shirt, but they're there to make a change in the world. This is why I consider the adventuring party an apt metaphor. But why is it useful? One reason I like co-opting TTRPGs as a metaphor for volunteer organizing is you don't really see a lot of community organizing in media. This section mostly focuses on film and TV, but this is common across other mediums. There is an abundance of media about organizations where the people are paid to be members, otherwise known as jobs. There are literally workplace comedies about every single profession imaginable. The Office, Abbott Elementary, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Superstore, Scrubs, Regular Show, Hell of a Boss, the list goes on. The prevalence of the workplace in so many forms of media shows the importance of work in American culture. The US also happens to produce a lot of popular media, so that these tastes and this culture get disseminated around the globe. Then there are organizations you pay to be a part of through a membership fee, or more commonly in American media, tuition. Schools and universities are a recurring backdrop for storytelling. Examples include, but are not limited to, Monsters University, An Extremely Goofy Movie, Happy Death Day, Good Will Hunting, Community. Especially here in the US, college is widely considered one of the most important and interesting times of your life. So it kind of makes sense that a lot of media centers on stories told in these environments. As for community organizing, most of what you're gonna get is biopics set in the 60s about the American Civil Rights Movement, any media about the Black Panthers, Has Been Hotel, and various iterations of Power Rangers, which is my favorite group of things to set together. Sidebar, if we're missing some of your favorite community organizing media, please put them in the comments. I would love to know more and find more examples, and maybe we can make a video about it. back to this thing. That last category expands dramatically when you consider D&D parties as community organizing. Now, more than ever, we need stories about people coming together and making the world a better place. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but shit's fucking weird. Another point for TTRPGs is that each main character at the table is extremely well developed. In a lot of media, even though those with ensemble casts, some members are sure to be left by the wayside, while others are substantially more developed and become a main character. This isn't really good in community organizing, and it's definitely not good at a D&D table. With a good dungeon master at the table, this should not be the case. Every character has their own lived experience. They have their own skills, they have their own quirks, their own motivations, all of which are fleshed out, because each character is played by an individual person. The way the story is told lends itself to accurate depictions of intergroup conflict. Because at that point, it's not a metaphor. It's real people having a real disagreement through the lens of fiction. Like that loot gremlin at your table. Why do they keep stealing all the potions? They don't need them. They're a rogue. They're getting out of them. Never mind. This metaphor also pares down the number of people in an organization to a manageable 5 or so, give or take. It's really hard to talk about a movement of tens, hundreds, or thousands of people, each of which having their own role to play in the organization. These movements are what I'm trying to characterize in my own research. And that work's not ready for the big screen yet. At 5 people, it's easier to focus on what is happening between the members, what their relationships are, how their goals align, how conflict develops and is resolved. Finally, I think this metaphor is just plain fun. Yes, there are real people doing real things in the real world, and really, I promise, we'll get to them in due time. However, you have to have some frameworks to understand those movements, to, in academic language, know what the fuck is going on. It's far more accessible to use the metaphor of powerful heroes in a fantasy world of wizards and goblins. We've been telling fake stories about real things for a long time. So why can't I? I want to do it. It's my turn. Now, is this the perfect metaphor? Yes. Okay, no. In the real world, we do not have a magical weave that allows something to be materialized from nothing, and thus no wish spells, which is a surefire way to achieve change. If you can kill enough dire rats to get to level 17. Volunteer organizations don't have the luxury of literal magic to solve problems. Further, unlike a successful adventuring party, volunteer organizations also can't pay out their members handsomely. It's not glamorous work out here. Finally, combat is generally frowned upon in the real world in real community organizing. And by the law, which we will discuss in greater detail in a later video. Stay tuned. Hit that bell. However, in spite of those ultimately small differences, I still find the metaphor apt. It emphasizes the most essential elements of volunteer organizing. How it's bigger than profit, how it requires buy-in from all party members, and how each of those party members are real people with real problems. It is very difficult to slay a dragon, and there are many dragons that still roam this land. They are hoarding wealth and resources and causing terror to the population. They are long-lived creatures, rather clever, and they have lackeys and henchmen and other such thralls to defend them and their hordes. Some dragons even manage to conspire and collaborate to make each other stronger. These dragons are numerous, and their effects wide-felt. Not in any order, and without discounting the other wretched beasts not listed, there are poverty, the cruel, misogyny, the ancient, dread, homelessness, racism, the vile, capricious climate change, and the siblings, homophobia and transphobia. Though, there is speculation that each and every one of these dragons serve a god, a young upstart only 500 years old, who ended the rule of a previous tyrant. But who that is and what their motives are, that That's a reveal best saved for later. No matter which dragon you decide is your BBEG, which we've already implicitly decided that you will, and what you might do to thwart them, you're gonna need help from other people. And, well, you might need to get help from other people. That is the point of this project, explaining dynamics of volunteer organizations through D&D so you can navigate them better. In the meantime, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and see you next session. What? I have to tell people to like, comment, and subscribe?
Yeah, Bedlam, that's part of the job of being a YouTuber.
That's stupid. All that does is boost us in the algorithm and motivate us to create more videos.
How else are we supposed to get the motivation if we do not have the validation of internet strangers as shown by likes and comments and views? Come on, Bedlam.
But I don't want to ask for help or their pity. I don't want to come across as needy.
Well, you're a YouTuber now. What you are is an internet beggar, okay? So can I get a like, comment, and subscribe, please, from you?
No, I'm not stooping for engagement, and no, I'm not doing something meta about it either.
Okay, fine. We'll record something else. We'll do something else. We'll figure it out. Okay.